Good morning to our many members and guests that are with us this morning. It is a real pleasure for us to welcome Iván Ontaneda, Minister of Production, Foreign Trade, Investment, and Fisheries of Ecuador since June of 2019. I would also like to give a very special welcome to Daniel Legarda, Vice Minister of Foreign Trade of Ecuador, and my dear friend Iván Baki, Ambassador of Ecuador to the United States. Under President Lenin Moreno, Ecuador has made trade integration and attracting foreign investment a real priority. And we have been so honored and pleased to be able to work with him on that endeavor at the Council of the Americas. Ecuador and the U.S. signed a new protocol on trade rules and transparency in December 2020, which set the stage for further discussions to deepen the collaboration between Ecuador and the United States. With a new president set to take office on May 24th, the country, Ecuador, will be focusing on economic recovery from COVID-19 pandemic. So it is a great moment as well to discuss their trade and investment agenda for 2021. This program is part of our trade advisory group, which Steve leads. And I'll now turn it over to our Council of America Senior Director, Steve Liston, to introduce the minister and to manage the program. Steve, thank you so much. Mr. Minister, it is just such a pleasure, Iván, to have you here with us today, albeit virtually. Steve.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks so much to the minister for being with us today. I'm going to introduce him, but before I do, I would like to make a couple of quick technical notes. The first is that the minister is going to make his opening remarks in Spanish. If you need interpretation into English, we are going to put in the chat, if it isn't there already, the dial-in number that you can call. Please note that this is a listen-only line. You can't have anything translated through it. You can just listen. And the remainder of the program will be in English. Second, we will be taking questions also via the chat function. So you may send me questions directly via the chat, and I'll put your question into the queue. Please identify yourself and your affiliation if you would like me to recognize those. Obviously, won't know unless you tell me. With that, it's an honor to be able to introduce the minister. He has a CV as long as my arm, and you're here to listen to him, not to me. So I'm not going to go through the entire CV, but I'm just going to give him a brief introduction, and undoubtedly will not do him justice. But as Susan said, Minister Ontaneda took on his current duties just under 2 years ago. He brings 30 years of experience as a businessman and agro-industrial entrepreneur in cacao and coffee, including an in-depth understanding of the international business environment for those products. Minister Ontaneda is also a pioneer in the implementation of inclusive businesses and value chains with small cacao producers. So thank you, Ministro. Gracias por estar con nosotros. Le cedo la palabra.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Muy buenos días a todos. Reciban un cordial saludo de parte del Gobierno Nacional.
From the national Ecuadorian government, our President Lenin Moreno Garces, the man who has been a leader for the transition in Ecuador, with a model of a coherent opening trade and leaving aside ideologies to be able to build strategic alliances with partners. Thanks to a clear vision and push, we have made great strides, and we are here today to discuss the achievements in Ecuador, but more concretely to be able to share with you the vision and to talk about the opportunities that today Ecuador offers the world, and also obviously to the U.S. especially. Allow me to greet personally Susan Siegel, the Executive Director of the Council of the Americas, and the rest of the board, and to the other companies, either Ecuadorian or foreign, that are here with us today. I also say a warm hello to Iván. We have been working together permanently in the restructuring and reformation of the relationship with the U.S. That has been a key piece in this period of time, and today Ecuador officially is already connected to the U.S. with a new era. Also with me is Daniel Legarda, Vice Minister of Foreign Trade, who has been here leading some of these processes. Thank you to all of you to receive us today. As a minister, as a businessman, an exporter during the last 30 years, I've been following closer all the transitions of the country. But also, I can see the well-being generated by trade, and that is translated into jobs and investments. That is why the government has actually focused on the production private sector. This model did not exist before. Today, our priority is concentrated to be able to have a sustainable endeavors. In Ecuador, 9 of 10 jobs are generated by this chain of production. At the beginning of this intervention, Ecuador has actually changed importantly internationally, has adopted something that is led by pragmatism, opening the doors to a world that is more globalized. In spite of the pandemic and the confinement, and in spite of the different situations, either financial or health ones that many countries went through, and also Ecuador, those exports actually became bigger, not the oil ones, of course. And then they actually reached to $15 billion in exports that are not oil. Not only there was an increase in the volume, but also the diversification that represents a growth of 10% compared to 2019. Obviously, I insist that this immense increase in production and the path of Ecuador that actually has dollars coming into the country because of bigger exports continues to be something very basic and important. That is why the policies of the national government, it is to promote and incentivize the growth of exports, the non-oil ones, and also to incentivize foreign investments directly into the country. We ended the country with a surplus of $700 million. And in 2019, it was negative in 3.7%. The export sector, non-oil one, became the motor that actually led other production. And that way, Ecuador continued receiving foreign currencies. And as I said, it is an organized economy. So that income was redistributed through a chain that actually made everything possible. In the oil industry, we have to increase work. It actually is very important for the generation of jobs and well-being. Ecuador is prepared to be able to export to the world foodstuff that actually have more than 2 years ago, Ecuador started a company called Premium and Sustainable that articulated in a public and private way with the different production sectors, especially with the sectors of agro export, so that they could increase in spite of the pandemic. And among other things, I'm going to talk about the banana sector that has generated a lot of jobs. So this is a product of a good management and a good articulation. Today, Ecuadorian actually have a preference tariff, being one of the few products that the North American country accepted within its package. This generated a reactivation in a sector that has to do especially with women, because it has 60% of women that are part of the workforce, and today they have a good job and they can go to companies that had to close, and that today with this new hope, with this new light, they open again their doors. The cocoa sector, the product of the gods. I'm the third generation of a company, of a family that has been involved in the cocoa production. So the efforts to be able to guarantee that it is produced by the best chocolate and the best cocoa in the world. This gives jobs to 120,000 families. Cocoa has actually been growing, but not only we are the first export and the best cocoa of the world, but we also export technology here in this country. And I invite all of you to come in, to investigate, to research, to invest on this important sector. Because yes, we have big players, but we have space to be able to help. And coffee also has an important, during the next few hours I'm going to be traveling to a coffee area, Manabí, a province that was actually hit by an earthquake. It is an agriculture area. And with the families, we have actually tried to get a product that is sustainable. And I wanted to say something concrete because I know about this. It is fundamental that you, in the private sector in the U.S., are able to incorporate yourselves into this, because we need other companies to guarantee that the purchases are done so that the markets are sustainable all over. And this is very good and sustainable in many production chains. This growth I've talked about is not just something that happened. We have worked very hard building strategic alliances through trade agreements. Concretely, I'm going to talk about 4 important agreements, bilateral ones that were worked on in 2019. The first one is with the U.S., and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. And then to build our relationship with our best trade partners, and that continues to be a priority for Ecuador. A priority that goes beyond governments, because today it's a state policy. I understand that there are some concerns because of the change of administration. We are really close to elections in Ecuador. Nevertheless, the trade agreements, this opening of the markets, it goes beyond governments, because we are 17 million Ecuadorians who need to sustain and maintain this model that generated stability and prosperity in the country and the region. I have seen how other countries, near countries to us, could not maintain these sustainable models that are productive. Even though being dollarized demands that we are very disciplined, but we also have to be efficient, and that challenge started some years ago, and today we continue following it. That has been one of the main pillars, so that the investments actually land in the country, together with some laws and some policies, because of the national government actually supports all this. So we have the agreement with the first phase with the U.S. that we are going to talk about it and to see where are we going with that. The EMPA agrees that this is 4 countries in Europe, and Ecuador actually used to sell to them products such as chocolate, flowers, pitahaya, and products above all that actually are good for small and medium companies. Today, thanks to this agreement, there are no taxes or tariffs, and that means that it will grow in sales towards that important group. And we will grow about 15%. Today, our organic bananas, shrimp, the flowers, and fisheries are already benefiting from this agreement, and we hope that our exports will continue growing. We are complementary economies, yes, but with that we have more opportunities for the production, for the producers. Then about the U.S., you know that the U.S. came out of the European Union, and we needed to get close with another important partner, such as the United Kingdom. That allowed that 95% of our exports would be free of taxes and tariffs to this possible market. The exports already increased 34% since we actually reached the agreement with the European Union. It was fundamental to actually keep this opening. And finally, the trade agreement with Chile. This is actually with a policy that President Moreno actually to get the country into the Pacific Alliance. With Chile, we have a bilateral agreement, and we signed an agreement that permits the exports. It actually created 16 direct places to work that will benefit from this increase in this exchange with this country. Well, all these things that we are doing should be very wholesome, and that's why we work towards the inside. That it's important to work in the competitiveness of the country, the quality and sustainability, and whatever it is actually requested from the most important markets in the world. In the fisheries and also agricultural department, we have $6 billion. The exports of shrimp, step by step, little by little, has positioned itself all over. Today, the shrimp in Ecuador is the most delicious, and I am not telling you that as the Minister of Ecuador, but the country says so. We participate in a better way in the different markets. And that is why Ecuador needed a law, a legal frame that would be adequate for the culture and the fisheries, and also it also represents $1,600 million. And we have a very important fleet that generates chains of production, not only in the two regions of the country, Tito and Guayaquil, but also in other regions of Ecuador. This new law that was elaborated and articulated with all the actors in the fisheries department, the artisans, the industrial ones, the small fishermen, it was approved unanimously in the National Assembly in April of 2020. This law has allowed us to have tools so that Ecuador today be the leader worldwide to fight against illegal fishing. We are leaders in very important spaces, and through economic sanctions that are very strong, so that those external and internal that are against the law are not allowed to operate. So this puts in evidence the difference generated because we have these new laws. We have done 2,670 inspections, more than 1,000 operations on land that has to do with the biological products, about 1,300 interventions of the fisheries, and then also on the sea, on vessels, and more than 100 on the river. We also invested more than $30 million on a project to increase competitiveness in the fisheries and agricultural sectors. In this process, we have the integrated system that is called SIA to automatize and systematize the trade of this production reducing human errors. And through these scientific endeavors, we are going to strengthen the technological personnel, and we will increase the efficiency and the capacity of the response to authorities on the quality controls and the legality of the fishery products. As I said, in Ecuador, we increased the exports in spite of the pandemic. And the well-recognized is not only quality, but also the most important thing, that to these human beings, what we want is safety. Safety that we can find through the biosafety. We are committed with all this, and because of the big migration of these species, we know that we have to do a regional effort. Just working in an articulated way, we are going to be able to mitigate and finally finish or end the illegal fishing. And that is why we have signed, and we are working with some other countries. We have special understandings with Costa Rica and Panama. We are exchanging experiences and protocols, and Ecuador, what it has been doing rightly so to be able to work along that line and towards that end. We have actually have a very good flow in terms of the fisheries resources, and with the regional of the South Pacific entity, we have proposed two important initiatives to be able to fight overfishing in our region. First, this is what we did, to forbid to do transfers in on the high seas. That is how we are going to have a better control. And secondly, to increase the number of observers in the more than 1,240 vessels that actually have to do in more than 17 countries. And we are also part together to the Global Ocean Alliance, participating in an active way in the mission to be able to protect 30% of our oceans for 2030. We receive gladly this opportunity to work together with other 25 countries, sharing as a priority the sustainable development of our fisheries. And we are happy to know that we are not alone. Leaving aside the fisheries, briefly I want to actually mention the law for production. Well, not only for the internal, also but external areas. Since 2018, when it came into effect, we actually have the judicial surety to convert Ecuador an ecosystem that will be very favorable for foreign investments. I'm going to invite you to look into this legal framework, which is actually a good incentive for investments, but it has also clear rules that this government worked on, because this is what we needed for investments. Rules that are not going to be changed, long transition from one government to another, because nowadays, today, Ecuador has this tool. We have signed more than 138 investment contracts with Ecuadorian and foreign companies. Many of you are here today. You already are benefiting from this law. We actually had $3 billion already, generating more than 80,000 jobs, direct ones, and more than 100 indirect ones. This is very important in terms of the Labor Department. And new laws in the humanitarian law that was proposed from the executive branch to be able to fight the very complex situation that Ecuador went through more than a year ago. You can remember that we were looking with different tools to be able to defend jobs. And talking about that, that means to give the tools to the micro, to the small and medium-sized companies so that they could actually reach a consensus between the employer and employees. We eradicated child labor. We eradicated child labor, I repeat. We are committed to generate jobs that are dignified for each Ecuadorian. So the same way that we are ready to actually come at the door and knock at the door to the U.S., we knew that to be able to regain the mistrust that was generated by the different ideologies, we actually had to demonstrate that our trade endeavors are actually something that are going to become a reality. So here with my dear ambassador, Iván, we are actually paving the way. And together with the President Lenin Moreno, we actually made a historic visit to Washington in February 2020. Both countries showed the will to be able to rebuild our bilateral relations, and as a result, we initiated a process with an agreement with the first phase with this important market. The 8th of December, we signed the said agreement, and we agreed, number one, to facilitate international trade, to simplify the process that had to do with the customers and reducing other problems. And secondly, we established good regulation practices. Why? To increase the investment flows between the countries. And besides that, we are going to have all the rules that is going to be part of the law. And then we fought against the commercial corruption to be able to have an exchange that was true, just, and real. And this is a proposal that came from our country. We actually put it on the table, and it was well received. And that had to be of benefit to small and medium, the small and medium-sized companies. It is important that these chains of value are the ones that actually are the base for the big companies. This is the true chain that Ecuador nowadays is incentivizing. And on this fourth point, the idea is to integrate the bilateral agreements and also the value chains through cooperation and the elimination of custom problems. This is very important because 82% of companies in Ecuador export, the ones who sell to the U.S., they are small and medium-sized companies, with so many that are benefiting with better commercial situation. Well, how is it that we were not going to consolidate our bilateral relations with this country? Well, to actually do something against our production sector was really an error, and that was changed. The U.S. became our first destiny with more than $3.1 billion. We grew 20% as compared to 2019. This is our main places for investment. It's about 100% of the direct exports from Ecuador. And during the third quarter, it was almost $90 million. So both countries have actually complementary economies. The U.S. exports to Ecuador not only machinery and technology and cellulose, among other things, but also a lot of basic products such as soy and polymers. And the consumers receive with happiness our fruits, our shrimp, our flowers, and fish, and of course, our chocolate. That exchange, which is multi-sectorial, that has benefited historically our countries. These numbers tell us that we are on the good path, even though we still have to explore a lot more. We trust finally that our capacity in production, in the strategic role that we have in our region, will continue on. Latin America is able to be integrated permanently in the supply chains to the U.S. This big initiative that will allow to structure the new role of the U.S. towards Latin America is fundamental through a better economic integration, and then giving support to the economic sectors in the country. We actually look for economies free of trade, but that will generate real opportunities for our region. Obviously, and these value chains also have to respect the environment and everything that goes with it. So we are open to participate in any of these. As I mentioned before, from 2017 on, we actually did important changes in certain policies and also made a better investment climate, giving more participation to the private sector. The agreement of the first place, as I said before, within an objective that is wider to ensure an association that will be a wholesome one with the U.S. This is the great challenge that the new government will have when we export. I've always said we don't export anything that are to the left or to the right. We produce quality products that the market wants at good prices, and of course that is the opening that nowadays are we proposing. Beyond that, we want to have a better alliance between Ecuador and the U.S. because that will strengthen the capacity and competitiveness of the entire hemisphere and will generate a trade based on clear rules and will better the possibilities, as I said, about employment, the rights to work, and the protection for the environment. We are establishing very important bases to be able to propel a better production with the main partners of the continent, benefiting of the next generations. This process must continue. It doesn't matter what government is going to be in charge in the country now. Daniel Lagarde, Vice Minister of Foreign Trade, who is going to add some other technical details to be able to open the context of a dialogue which is a little bit wider with all of you. Thank you for your time, and I hope that I have been able to put in context everything that is happening in Ecuador. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Ministro. Thank you, Mr. Minister. And now we'll turn the floor to Vice Minister Lagarde. Vice Minister.
Thank you, Steve. Gracias, Ministro, Embajadora, y a todos. Steve, if it's okay with you, I think I'd rather prefer to have some questions because I know there's been raised some opinions and questions from our audience, and be more than glad to answer them along with the Minister, of course, our Ambassador. But please go ahead. I think it's better that way.
Perfect. We're happy to do that, of course. And I know that you're prepared to answer along with the ministers. So I just want to remind people that you can raise your hand, or you can ask better would be to actually put it in the chat if you have a question, so that we can see it in the chat. And I will put you in the queue when I see your question. And don't forget to tell me who you are, since some of you the name is not obvious, and what your affiliation is, so that we can add that. So please feel free to send a question in the chat there. While we're looking for those, let me start with a question, Mr. Minister. And the question really is, you mentioned this desire to do more with the United States on trade, to expand the sort of phase one, as they were calling it, agreement. We know that the new administration is, the Biden administration is really looking at enforcement of trade agreements. And so my question for you is sort of what is your message to them on implementation of these trade agreements, on labor and environment? You've mentioned sustainability, you've mentioned protection of the environment, and obviously this trade forward agenda has been so helpful in a year of great tragedy for your country, for our country, for all of us through the pandemic. But what is your message to the Biden administration going to be as to why this sort of going farther with this agreement is so important, and particularly on the implementation?
Sí, gracias por la pregunta. Nuestra relación con la administración Biden.
Yes, thank you for the question. Our relationship with the President Biden is a good relation from state to state. We already have had many conversations in terms of cooperation and obviously commerce, but I I am waiting to have my final travel, which is going to be had to do with a very strong agenda that we will actually look at with the USDR, with the state of the first phase agreement, and then to see the growth that Ecuador has actually has done with the U.S. But not only that, but also to have a clear path so that we can continue on the effort that both countries are looking for. The question in terms of how to support all the efforts from the environment and also the commerce ones in Ecuador. Those are something that actually talked about in all the spaces that have to do with international commitments that are part of the commercial agreements. Ecuador actually has to inform the U.S. about the updating of the labor laws and the different advances that have been done in terms of child labor and protection for the free association and labor inspections, and also in terms of these times of the COVID pandemic. And then to have an open dialogue with NOAA, to be able to inform about the measures that actually have started to be able to fight illegal fishing, especially in the Protection Acts that has to do with the Protection Acts of the U.S. Ecuador has informed about the modernization of the rules that actually are going to be applied, and we have important investments, about $30 million. And Ecuador has established a very frame that is going to do something very important for the climate. We have initiatives such as the Convention of the U.S. of the fight against the certification, and obviously other agreements. And besides that, we actually had the most important changes. Right now, we have 22 initiatives with technical cooperation, together with some projects that in total are about $180 million were to be able to contribute to the management for the climate change.
Thank you, Minister. And I really I hope that the Biden administration is listening. You've got a great story to tell about these things, but it's so important. We at the Council are so supportive of this idea of expanding these trade agreements, and it just makes so much sense to do that with Ecuador. I'd like to turn to one element of the issue with your new protocol, which is digital trade, which is in there, and just ask, what is Ecuador doing to make sure that it can take full advantage of digital trade, the digital economy that we've seen this last year is so critical now to everything that we're doing. If you could just talk about that a little bit.
Yes. Ecuador, through the production ministry and telecommunication, and then also Intel, in coordination with the private sectors, with the academia and also the civil society, started the national strategy for commercial trade, formalized through an interministerial agreement. I would like to mention to you that this strategy visualizes everything in a wholesome, not just through a channel for sales, but it has through taxes and safety, electronic payments, and also many other things. This strategy has 4 components, and I'm going to tell you very quickly. One has a legal framework to strengthen and the rules and then for small and medium companies so that they can visualize the opportunities for development internally and externally. And then third, payment that are safe with technologies for the transaction to facilitate for the payment on products and services. And finally, logistics in the process of electronic commerce. We want to establish something that is safe to be able to use all this. To that effect, the U.S. could help Ecuador to implement this link based on the 4 components I mentioned just before, to generate in the country a data culture that would be the basic to be able to develop electronic commerce. And the U.S. could also help to develop new digital skills to create something that will be a combination between the consumer and also the small and medium-sized
Thank you.
companies.
A related question that came in is about technical, or how can you go from primary exports to really more value-added exports that have a higher technical component, a higher value add. What's the plan for Ecuador in those terms?
Ecuador, for many years, has been positioned in basic products and products that are of higher quality, and we are important ones all over the world. Ecuador is the first producers for shrimp and bananas in the world. And cocoa, we talked about in flowers also. These are industries that have grown importantly, especially the fisheries. But it's important to concentrate, and we have a strategy for credits, incentives for new value chains. We have diversified in the last year. We have increased more than 18 more products, foodstuffs that have added value, that have actually supported the agreements that I actually mentioned at the beginning. And these products are growing. They are in the country, but they are actually taking advantages of the potential abroad. So they will have to have credits together that we have to have for this more. We have a law of entrepreneurship so that those people and companies that actually are starters actually will be able to grow and create added value. We have a system with government policies to be able to identify what is the demand, and then the most important thing, which are the opportunities that Ecuador can have to participate in international markets.
Thank you very much. So important to keep working on that, obviously. Don't stop with the chocolate, though, because I'm a big fan of Ecuadorian chocolate.
Sure.
So,
we have the
so keep that going.
Chocolate, for sure.
Good. Let me turn to the investment climate. I've gotten a couple of questions about the investment climate. One has to do with the framework for investing in infrastructure and where you see that going. And the other has to do with the fact that there's some ongoing, long-standing investment disputes. And how do you see those evolving? How do you see the government being able to manage those disputes so that it can help convince businesses to come in, that they'll be able to be treated fairly, and particularly with regard to intellectual property protections? What is Ecuador doing to make sure that investors feel comfortable that their intellectual property will be safe and respected and that disputes can be handled? So those have come in over the chat, and any comments on those, infrastructure and disputes?
Sí, well, as a businessman, I think that investments don't lead the country through decree or some other. The country has to generate that safety so that investments come. We need the legal framework that generates that stability that investors look for. I have talked about the law for the production incentive, and that has actually something that has been there since 2018, and it's going to take us to 2025 to be able to have liquidity in the companies and also to incentivize investments, and actually to not tax through income that has been produced, and that will be a benefit up to 15 years. It depends where the investment is done, in Quito, Guayaquil, or maybe in other areas of the country. We also have forgiveness of the Ocb tax. So the tariff that was on the exports of currency that we are actually looking into the government to be able to do away with a tax that somehow was an impediment for more investments. I want to be clear. This government has tried to reduce taxes and also has tried to facilitate investments so that the production sectors actually have these incentives, and then we continue working on that. I think that the next government is going to have great challenges that will be concrete. We have advanced, but there's a lot to do still, but then the way is already paved. We have all that for basic products and also capital goods. Those are the payments that are done abroad because of the purchase of basic products, and that will be destined to new products. The ones that are here in the U.S., after they pay the income tax whenever it is advisable through the effective beneficiaries, actually, they have to be either people who are, well, it doesn't matter if they are in the Ecuador or abroad. We are also working with the international, such as the Untitled, the World Bank, and through them we are looking to increase the indicators for the business ratings and also to develop the political laws for investments. And that will allow to have a framework to increase, importantly, the productivity of the country, to ensure investments that will actually be good. This policy would be for Ecuador as a result, coherence on investment, and at the same time would actually be something very good for the country to be able to facilitate the investments that we require. And then finally, I would like to say that we are working on a program of the what we call the only window for investment. It has to do with the simplification of rules with the Inter-American Bank. We are developing an agreement of several $1 million, and then we are going to be the second or the third country in the region to be able to have this tool that will be simplification. To open a company and to be able to have these benefits is going to be something fast. That will be good for the competitiveness of the production.
Very important, and we are close to out of time. I've got a lot of questions coming at me on a lot of different things, but I do want to give Ambassador Baki a chance to say something. And before I turn to her, let me, Minister, ask you just one more general question that I think is on everyone's mind, which is, you said that trade is now a state policy, política de Estado, no? This commercial policy. What makes you think that these changes now that have been implemented over the last 4 years are going to continue regardless of who wins? Why do you see that as being sort of a new phase, a new change? What has happened, and what gives you confidence, and how can you give the business community confidence that that this is in fact going to continue in the new government?
It's okay,
good. Now you're hearing. We're having a little connection problem. That's all right. This is the last question. So,
no, sure. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Please, go ahead.
What kind of confidence can you give the business community that this new trade policy, this very forward-leaning trade policy that has been implemented by President Moreno, will continue in the next government, regardless of who wins? What kinds of things have happened to make that change?
La seguridad de que
Well, the safety that the next administration, next government will continue with the production financial incentive nowadays has to do with the reality of our country nowadays. This government, our government, has given a lot of importance to the participation of the production, private production sectors. They are part of a great cluster that has allowed to establish a strategy and a route that we are going to continue following. If we want to sustain dollarization and we need more investors, because there's no other way to be able to sustain the model of to have excessive expenditures, and this has actually put Ecuador in very critical situations. And today, with great valor, actually we had to face all this, and maybe we made decisions that were not so popular, but they were necessary to be able to govern and also to generate that trust, the trust that nowadays the world recognizes vis-a-vis Ecuador, and we are actually doing the final articulation. This model to grow, I am sure that actually is going to be supported. That there are more than 5.5 million in the country don't have a regular job, and not because of the pandemic, because of all other bad decisions that we made. We want to generate opportunities for the sectors, and obviously we hope, and we have actually talked to the different political lines about the new possible administration, so that everything continues on this route. Ecuador cannot jump from one administration to another and change drastically what has been done, and that was of benefit to the country.
Well, thank you, Minister. This has been, this has been incredibly important to hear what you are, what you're saying. So, and we are so hopeful that you will be able to do more of a trade deal with the United States and with others, and that this will continue. I'd like to turn, with your permission now, to Ambassador Baki and give her an opportunity just to say a few words. We've got about 4 minutes left, and I want to apologize to all those whose questions we weren't able to answer on express services and the central bank bill and all kinds of things. But the good news is there's a lot of interest. So Ambassador Baki, I'm going to turn it over to you if you would like to make a few comments before we close. You'll need to unmute. There we go. Now you're unmuted.
Yvonne, I can hear you. Okay, please.
Well, thank you very much to Steve, to everybody, to the whole team here. So during the President Moreno's government, as an ambassador of the Ecuador to the U.S., we actually have had his support to be able to transfer everything to the U.S. and also to other countries in the world, what we have been doing in terms of the incentives, and to be able to build everything here in Ecuador. But it was always a very enriching experience, because it has been actually great to hear such eloquent presentations telling us about the policies in Ecuador for this year and next year. And actually, we have the most qualified people ever in Ecuador to be able to implement the commercial policies. And actually to be able to face the challenges in the West, in During 2020, that was a year that was terrible because of the pandemic. The entire world is still actually implementing policies to be able to recover their economies. We cannot actually just put the future of millions and millions of people, because it all depends on the policies that actually the government puts in place. And then the commerce will have an important role, and it is necessary that the administration sets priorities for all this. The effect of trade is enormous because it generates jobs, and that allows also to be able to export more and actually to incentivize the economic activities in other countries, and also allows that country to import or export more goods and services. And in terms of social services and all that, actually to be able to support this virtual cycle in the last few years, Ecuador has actually done incredible things. It was also mentioned in terms of what happened during the pandemic, because we actually did very important agreements, two of them, and actually the phase one agreement that has to be ratified, and also the commercial agreement with Chile. Our main bilateral challenge during the next few months is that it has to be consolidated all over in the U.S. because Ecuador is a key piece for the stability in the region. This is why we actually received everything that has been said lately, but also we have to look to that as a tool for the implement. You know, we have actually been trying to achieve this during many years, and finally we are getting there. We have to do this in a very balanced way. When we talk about development rules, not only we have to defend our own workers, leaving aside the workers for our commercial partner. It has to be a solidarity effort that will benefit everybody in the end. And to be able to do that during the President Lenin Moreno has actually done a lot of work on these commercial endeavors. We are going to see that, well, that the next government has to have enough vision to be able to continue on this path that was opened with the participation, because actually I would like to tell everybody that I thank him enormously for his vision and patriotism for the good of our country and the culture of the region. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Now we see why you're such an effective advocate for Ecuador in Washington. We really appreciate all of your strong support for the private sector and, of course, your partnership with the Council of the Americas. Thank you for those words. We've come to the end of our program for today. And I want to again thank the Minister Ontaneda. Thank you, Vice Minister Lagarda. Thank you, Ambassador. And thank all of you for joining us today. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. But all of us, as you know, Minister, are watching the elections. And we're hoping that the new government that will take office in May has the same commitment to promoting trade, investment, and partnership with the private sector. There will always, of course, be issues, but the key to resolving them is a willingness to work together, and that's what the Council is all about. So a quick programming note, which is that I hope to see many of you again on the 25th of March when we host the Secretary of Foreign Trade of Brazil. And we hope that you all have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you again virtually soon and in person, we hope, in the not too distant future. In the meantime, stay healthy, and this is the end of our public program. Thank you.